Harriet Ann Jacobs was born a slave in Edenton, North Carolina in 1813. After her mother, Delilah, and father, Elijah, died during Jacobs' youth, she and her younger brother, John, were raised by their maternal grandmother, Molly Horniblow. Jacobs learned to read, write, and sew under her first mistress, Margaret Horniblow, and hoped to be freed by her. However, when Jacobs was 11 years old, her mistress died and willed her to Dr. James Norcom, a binding decision that initiated a lifetime of suffering and hardships for Jacobs. Dr. Norcom, represented later as Dr. Flint in Jacobs' narrative, sexually harassed and physically abused the teenage Jacobs as long as she was a servant in his household. Jacobs warded off his advances by entering into an affair with a prominent lawyer named Samuel Treadwell Sawyer, bearing him 2 children, Joseph and Louisa Matilda, who legally belonged to Norcom. Fearing Norcom's persistent sexual threats and hoping that he might relinquish his hold on her children, Jacobs hid herself in the storeroom crawlspace at her grandmother's house from 1835 until 1842. During these 7 years, Jacobs could do little more than sit up in the cramped space. She read, sewed, and watched over her children from a chink in the roof, waiting for an opportunity to escape to the north. Jacobs was finally able to make her way to New York City by boat in 1842 and was eventually reunited with her children there. Even in New York, however, Jacobs was at the mercy of the fugitive slave law, which meant that wherever Jacobs lived in the United States, she could be reclaimed by Norcoms and returned to slavery at any time. Around 1852, her employer, Cornelia Grinnell Willis, purchased her freedom from the Norcoms. Jacobs' decision to write her autobiography stemmed from correspondence with her friend Amy Post, a Quaker abolitionist and feminist activist. Jacobs had befriended Post in Rochester, New York in the late 1840s after she had moved there to join the abolitionist movement with her brother, John. In 1861, with the aid of white abolitionist editor Lydia Marie Child, Jacobs published her narrative entitled Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl under the pseudonym Linda Brent. Jacobs' surviving correspondence with Child validates incidents as entirely Jacobs' work, with only minor editing on Child's part. Despite the use of her pseudonyms, Jacobs did gain fame for a time after its publication. She entered into public service with her daughter during the 1860s, aiding refugees during the Civil War and opening the Jacobs Free School in Alexandria, Virginia. After several trips south and one abroad to England, Jacobs reestablished herself as a relief worker in Washington, D.C. in the 1880s and died there on March 7, 1897. Harriet Jacobs' autobiography, Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl, published in 1861, is the most widely read female antebellum slave narrative. In recounting her life experiences before she was freed, Jacobs offered her contemporary readers a realistic portrayal of her sexual history while a slave. Although several male authors of slave narratives had referred to the victimization of enslaved African women by white men, none had addressed this subject as directly as Jacobs finally chose to. She not only documented the sexual abuse she suffered, but also explained how she had used her sexuality as a means of avoiding exploitation by her master. Risking her reputation in the disclosure of such intimate details, Jacobs appealed to a northern female readership that might sympathize with the plight of a southern mother in bondage. Indeed, throughout her narrative, Jacobs focuses on the importance of family and motherhood. She details the strain of being separated from her grandmother and 2 children during the 7 years in hiding, and afterwards in New York and Boston when she lacked the means to free her daughter.